These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way. Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do. I respect the history, I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. The biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred. This is the great American motorsport. Drag racing. Prove me wrong. I'll wait. Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine, checking in. It is Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. How about that intro? I think this is my first time I've watched it all the way through, and I'm like, man, that's really good. Anyways, hey, thank you guys so much for joining us here on the show. As always, please remember, click like, click subscribe. If you're watching along on YouTube, join the channel. We're about to break 10,000 followers or 10,000 subscribers, I think, today. So huge deal. We got about 500,000 of you, though, here on Facebook. So click like, click share, help us spread the gospel of drag racing. Quick shout out to all the companies that make this show possible each and every week. Of course, our friends at Redline Synthetic Oils, Stroud Safety, Racers Club, and what is there, another one? Oh, Flow Racing. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot the guys and gals at Flow Racing. Had a great call with them earlier in the week. Shout out to the whole Flow Racing camp. We went into the World Series of Pro Mod this year wanting to kind of redefine or reestablish the standard when it comes to production value in drag racing, and I think we achieved that there in the first weekend of March. So huge shout out to everybody that supports the show. Thanks for being a part of it. We got a big one for you today. In just a little bit, about a half hour from now, we will be joined by the one, the only Alex Taylor, Drag and Drive star and rising television star, who is on the cover of Drag Illustrated issue 181, our annual Women of Power special issue, the 11th time we've done a Women of Power special issue, one of the most celebrated, talked about, exciting issues of the magazine we put out every year. I challenged our team earlier in the week that we need to turn this into an event, a happening, a cultural happening here in the drag racing community, and I think we are achieving that. It's the talk of town. It's so proud of this year's selection of women that I really don't know their role. I don't know that it can be overstated. I mean, whether they're racers themselves, operate as part of a support system, members of the industry in many different ways, media members, tuners, hands-on mechanic types, and everything in between. Can't say enough about the incredible women that are involved in the sport of drag racing, and we're proud, very proud, honored, humbled, everything that can be said about rolling this issue out each and every year. So anyways, we will be joined by Alex Taylor, who's on the cover of the magazine this month, in just a short little while. We also have to go over the NHRA Winternationals, the third stop on the NHRA Camping World Drag Racing Series Tour, as well as the PDRA East Coast Nationals, the season opener for big-time door slammer drag racing out there on at Galat Motorsports Park in Benson, North Carolina. But before I get any further along, let me introduce my co-host here on the Wes Buck Show, the one and only Mike Carpenter, JT Hudson. What's up, boys? We doing good?
What's up?
Good, man. What's up?
Yeah.
Let's touch on this real quick. How much better does my camera look? We got an upgraded camera for Wes this week. I think it looks better.
Yeah, man. I mean, bringing out those skin tones, the shirt choice and the skin matching, that's a bold move, man. But it looks good.
Oh my goodness.
JT's going for the late St. Patrick's Day look. Or is that
It's Masters Week, baby.
Masters Week. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Masters Week. Okay, so hey, let's talk about that, because I was following along a little bit, and Masters Week, what we need to come up with a name for World Series of Pro Mod Week. Maybe that's what it is, but we need to build around that. That's what I think happens next for our event, is how can we turn that entire week into more of a happening instead of just Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but the entire week.
It's to choose a menu. We have a champions dinner, and
it's going to be
eating.
What did Canadian bacon, maple, with a side of maple syrup.
All right,
here Canadian food. I've run out of the Canadian bacon. Probably not even a Canadian food.
Molson beer. Is that right?
This is a great idea. Real quick. So let's actually turn the party on Thursday night into the Champions Dinner, maybe. Like, I don't want to totally step on the Texas Motorplex's idea, because you guys remember we were all three there last year at the Texas Motorplex Champions Dinner, and it is modeled after the Masters Champions Dinner. So I don't want to totally steal their concept or steal their shine. I'm normally not above that. But couldn't we do that on Thursday night and turn the Thursday night Racers Welcome Party into, like, let Spencer pick the menu or something, or pick what we're going to eat? You turn it into something that Spencer's got a hand on, if that makes sense at all.
His favorite drink or something. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Spencer just picks the menu.
Crown
Royal. Yeah.
Maple. Crown Royal Maple, right?
Crown Royal Maple. Unbelievable, guys. So, hey, real quick, thanks everybody for being a part of this deal. Jason Chapman, you're a badass too. Again, guys, click like, click subscribe, click share, help us spread the message. So, you guys, where do you want to start? You want to talk? Do you want to start with the NHRA, or do you want to start with PDRA door slammer stuff? Where do you guys want to start today?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Up to you guys.
Let's do NHRA first.
All right, we'll talk about the NHRA first. So, dude, I'm still struggling to get used to seeing the Winter Nationals in late March. I personally think that event may need rebranded. I just don't know that it's not fluent.
It definitely seems like a bit of an afterthought of moving that race, but not necessarily renaming it. But you do have a ton of brand equity in the Winter Nationals, but clearly we're out of winter at this point, right? I mean, that's a tough deal. And it's probably, I heard many references to it. Actually, Alan Reinhart made a reference to a sportsman racer whose daughter was getting married. I think it was a sportsman racer, may have been a different class. Their daughter was getting married this weekend, so they weren't participating. So they had someone else in the car. And he was like, what racer's daughter schedules a wedding on over top of the Winter Nationals? He said, but in all fairness, they probably didn't think that the Winter Nationals were going to be in late March. So it's a different thing for everybody to get adjusted to. And I wonder, they've got a lot of investment, a lot of things going on with that track, with In-N-Out Burger. They kind of rebranded, re-graphicked that whole place. So they've got a little bit of incentive to make that deal work. And we'll see. I've heard the In-N-Out people are hands-on with it and trying to make it work. So we'll see where they go from there. But they've had 2 barn burners to start the season.
I mean, I got to be honest. We talked about, JT and I talked about this a little bit in what kind of took off, a little bit of a rant of mine about people piling on and loving to spread negativity. But I was massively impressed by the crowd in Pomona. I mean, there was a lot of people there. NHRA was sending out photos to the media, and there was a hell of a crowd. So despite being 2023 Southern California, all these things kind of working against you, I feel the NHRA was well represented this past weekend in Pomona, California. And I don't know that anybody involved in our sport, whether you're tied to the NHRA or operate in some other part of this program, heads held high right now.
It's a perspective thing too. I mean, I don't know the seating capacity difference between Pomona and Phoenix, but you maybe could have taken that Phoenix crowd and put them in Pomona, and it looks just like what we saw this weekend. It's without talking to the one and only seating capacity guru, Brett Kepner. I don't have any facts and figures, but again, we talk about the venue. That place still has a ton of seating. Pomona does. So even though they had half of it, the right lane side, covered up with banners and graphics, it still holds a ton of people. And how does that compare? Gainesville actually holds the most. I know that, and is always at capacity. So it's hard to even compare to that event, but compared to some of these events that like we're going to next 2 weeks from now, or next weekend, actually, Vegas, the seating capacity and are you getting a bigger crowd in a larger venue, or a smaller crowd in a smaller venue, vice versa? It's always hard to tell.
Yeah, I agreed. And we run into that all the time, because you take a crowd, like we had on hand at the World Series of Pro Mod, and you plop that group of people down, at some of these mega venues, and it probably would look sparse. So you have to keep that in mind. But I agree. 3 races into the NHRA season, 3 home runs, incredible start to the season. My concerns, actually, I don't know that I really have any about the NHRA series as a whole right now. It just feels like for something that's been around for 7 decades, it does feel rejuvenated. Like there's a renewed energy amongst the competitors, amongst the fan base, amongst the series officials. I just feel like this is a high tide moment for the NHRA. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, the past couple of years they've been hot, and the competition level's been there, I think, and everybody stepped their game up. And then I think these we're seeing different winners. I think that maybe that helps as well, where someone's not running off with the class.
For sure.
Helps.
However, that's a great
Justin
segue.
Ashley.
Yeah,
Justin
great
Ashley's
segue.
killing it in
He
in
is.
Top Fuel, man. And plus,
Well, he was on last week.
You get that Wes Buck Show bump, man. And there's no telling where you can go.
I did some math over the weekend. Actually, ChatGPT did some math over the weekend, but an average reaction time of 0:43 for Justin Ashley. I asked him right here on the show last week, like, what's the secret sauce? And he kind of talked about focus and consistency and all these things. But I do think it's worth mentioning that the dude goes back-to-back 3 races into the season. He's got the lowest average reaction time. If they can continue to keep this marriage alive and well of him killing it behind the wheel and the car running performing at a high level, they are going to be a problem for the foreseeable future.
He's probably got a little chip on his shoulder, don't you think?
I think so too.
After last year, I mean,
yeah,
you have to be let down by that a little bit.
Yeah, he had kind of a, I don't want to say epic collapse, but he was sitting in the catbird seat for the championship, and then it just all fell apart. So I'm sure he came in this year guns blazing.
Yep. Agreed. I'm happy for him. I think he's coming into his own, I believe, also as like a character and a speaker, because I was worried that he was getting like too polished, and it wouldn't. I've seen that happen before, where guys get like too rehearsed, too polished. But I felt like right here on the show last week, he really kind of, let loose a little bit, and we got to see a real genuine kind of version, the authentic Justin Ashley. And I think he's keeping that going. I mean, here's the truth is that he is a polished guy.
Yeah.
Right? That's how he is. That's how he behaves. So it's not like an act. I've seen other people try to put that on, and it doesn't come off as genuine, right? It's like, okay, listen, quit rehearsing in front of a mirror, right?
You guys are super polished, and then you have to hang out with me every now and then.
JT knocks our polish.
Yeah, get your polish down, dull you up a little bit.
I got to be honest, man. I look at I think JT makes a valid point, because Steve Torrance out in round 2. We haven't seen much out of Mike Salinas since the first race of the season. Now, granted, that wasn't long ago, but I mean, Justin Ashley, Austin Prock. I mean, I think these are going to be some names that we're talking about throughout 2023. Obviously, Brittany Force, Steve Torrance, those people aren't going anywhere. We definitely saw the Coletta Motorsports cars. They've made the turn. I feel we're seeing those cars perform. Sean Langdon, J.R. Todd, Doug Coletta, those Coletta Motorsports cars now being tuned by Alan Johnson. I think we're seeing now the performance we expected last year. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to see them more so in the mix than they have been for a while. How about
tough weekend for J.R. Todd,
man?
That's a rough one. He said basically this is one of those weekends where you just wish he'd have stayed home. I mean,
and he said he would do anything, like, I'll drive parts, I'll do whatever, I'd help these guys. I mean, yeah, that's
you ain't drag raced if you haven't had a moment, had a weekend like that, in my opinion. I mean, not maybe funny cars spontaneously combusting or another funny car hitting you at 300 miles an hour, but like those weekends are not totally uncommon for those that have like fought the drag racing battle for a long time, but my goodness, the situation with John Force, that made the hair stand up on my neck. I'm going, oh my goodness, that was completely sketchy. Car loses traction way down there, darts over into the other lane. And I feel that event, or that happening, could have been a lot worse than it ultimately was.
Oh yeah.
But what, JR needs to, I don't know what he's going to need to do, because you can't ask for much worse of a weekend. Then
got to get back out there. You got to get back out to the next race, man. I mean, Vegas can't come fast enough for him and that team. And how about, let's talk a little bit about Pro Stock. I think we're seeing some new faces, or not new faces, just some surprise faces. We saw Dallas Glenn in the winner's circle this weekend. Camry Caruso, number 1 qualifier, coming off of her win. And then to me, Matt Hartford, he went to the semis and had arguably the car to beat in the event at Phoenix, and then went out and run it up last weekend in Pomona as well. He's had a hot start to the season. So just seeing a little bit, and at the same time, I think especially Erica Enders, tough start to the season for her. So between
this is kind of how Elite started last year.
Yeah, a little bit of a slow start, but Erica,
not last year. Last year they were pretty dominant all year, but came out and came off a year where Erica didn't win
the year prior was a little bit slow, but she had the deal in Gainesville last year. That was a rough start to the season, and then a little bit of a slow start this year.
I got a bunch of
it's opened the door. I was just saying that her dominance last year just sort of set us up to think, it's Erica or bust. And now her struggling to start the season has kind of opened the door for some other people to get in there, get some wins, gather some points, and make it interesting this year.
Matt Hartford, to your point, Mike, best lever in the class right now. I ran the math on who had the lowest average reaction time 3 races into the season in eliminations, counting people that have been in 2 rounds, at least 2 rounds of racing. And Matt Hartford, his average reaction time so far this year is an 0.25. I mean, there's Dallas Glenn right behind him, Aaron Stanfield right behind him, Greg Anderson right behind him. It feels to me that KB Racing team is operating with something of a chip on their shoulder. And it's not just showing up in how those cars are performing on the racetrack. I mean, because we've seen big speeds from them. We've seen, like you mentioned, Camry Caruso getting her first career #1 qualifier this past weekend. This past weekend.
I think it was her second.
Oh, it was.
She got one last year.
Yeah, in Houston, right?
Yep.
I think maybe in Houston. Anyways, second of her career. So KB's clearly making, I think what we're seeing is this weird kind of dynamic where is there such a thing as like a championship hangover? Perhaps. I mean, not
or that or the chip on the shoulder. I mean,
well,
because it really reminds me of last year.
Well, it's the same pattern. You had KB win the title, Greg won the title, come out. Erica is dominant, got the chip on her shoulder, and
not just Erica. Elite was, I mean, I think TJ had back-to-back wins, and
these guys, these 2 powerhouse teams, the KB deal, the Elite team, it's a pendulum. It doesn't swing very far because we're talking about pro stock. We're talking about thousandths of a second, but one team goes back to the drawing board, comes up with something, gets a 10, finds 10 horsepower or something, and it changes everything until the other team starts to find something. It just seems to swing back and forth, and it makes it interesting.
I think Greg
for us, in the media and fans.
I think Greg talked about that a while back on the show. That maybe we rested a little bit too much, after that year, and they found something, and I think he alluded to it.
Yeah, it's the ebbs and flows of the way professional drag racing, I think, oftentimes works. I mean, you see it in other sports, but that's a great observation, in my opinion, that you had Greg Anderson win the championship and do it in relatively dominant fashion. I mean, he probably should have had an even better year than he did based on how well the car was performing.
Well, he came out to start that year, if you remember, at our race, guns blazing, man. I mean, he had the car to beat literally from preseason.
Literally. So he comes out, takes the championship, does it in dominating fashion. And then, to your point, Elite answers, chip on their shoulder, operating with really feeling like they have something to prove. There's this history component, all these things, 5-time world champion, potentially. Erica Enders looks dominant. After a weird start in Gainesville, that first race was a little odd where she lost on a whole shot, made the quickest run in the history of the class, lost on a whole shot, and she was super devastated about it. But she rebounded immediately and went on a tear, a near historic tear, in my opinion, as far as round wins. Obviously historic in the fact that 5th world championship, but I think Greg Anderson's the only person to win more races in a single season in pro stock.
Yeah.
Anyways, and now we're seeing the tables turn here in 2023. So, honestly, I hope they all hear this, but they're really doing a great job for the sport of drag racing. If it weren't for those 2 teams, I mean, the pro stock would be in a really, really odd position. So I'm here for it. I'm here to watch the pendulum swing back and forth. I'm here to see what unfolds throughout the course of 2023, because it seems like the rivalry, it's only intensifying, right? I mean, it is. We had the staging drama, that whole situation, and obviously some tempers flared, feelings hurt, all those things. And we're going to see that carry over throughout the rest of the season, in my opinion. We
saw some of that, didn't we, this last weekend? I think more people are paying attention, and more people are, hey, I'll try it. I mean, Shit.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think you got it. That's the thing that I get frustrated when our sport kind of shies away from these little bouts of controversy. When it happens, let's just accept it. It is what it is. We talked about this last week, Mike. You missed it briefly, but could you ask for better drama? On track, kind of clean cut drama. Most sports, when they get drama, it's something real bad. Somebody's going to jail. You know what I mean? There's some big catastrophe. Drugs are involved, whatever. In our sport, knock on wood, by the grace of God, when we have drama, Camry took too long to stage, or you know what I mean? It's stuff like that. Or Manny Bajinga and Chris Thorne get into an epic staging duel and it gets everybody a buzzing. These are good pieces of drama, good, healthy controversy that our sport needs more of. I actually had, not to get totally off topic here, but I had a conversation with Manny yesterday, and I told him, I said, don't stop. Drag racing needs cowboys. Like that's in cowgirls. Yeah. That's what our sport needs more of. We need people being willing to own those roles. So don't stop doing it. Don't let, somebody getting their feelings hurt or someone getting their feathers ruffled change how you're going to behave out there on the racetrack, because we need more of it, not less. I truly believe the start of the 2023 season has been as exciting of a start to the year as I've seen. Nearly 20 years in the business, right? 20 years of earning my living in the sport of drag racing. And I don't know that I've ever seen the tide higher overall than it is right now. And I can't help but believe some of these little controversies and some of these budding rivalries, and that's all contributing to where we're at right now as a sport. So anyways, guys, real quick before we got a big special guest here in the green room, and I know we have limited time. So let me pay some bills here real quick, JT. I want to remind you guys that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is made possible by way of our friends at Stroud Safety. Stroud Safety is known for their top quality racing safety equipment, from drag chutes and seatbelts to fire suits and blankets, all 100% made in America. Log on to stroudsafety.com today and make sure you tell them we sent you. Guys, we haven't gotten to dive into this too much, so we'll do it as she arrives. The brand new issue of Drag Illustrated magazine, issue number 181. Let's give it up. Come on, 181 strong. Yeah. Let's go.
We weren't sure we were going to make it to 18, but here we are.
We sure as hell wasn't positive we were going to make it to 2. I mean, I'm telling you, if there were ever darker days than that, I'm not sure what they were. But I thought, man, we may be the classic one and done deal. This may be it. But here we are, 181 issues later.
Lifetime subscription. Get your lifetime subscription.
Yeah, that's probably what put us over the top, was the lifetime subscription offer back in 2007. Brilliant.
And about
brilliant.
put you down a little later.
It did. It still hurts, to be honest, to this day. Questionable decision on my behalf. But hey, I stand by it. For the 11th time, Drag Illustrated put together its special issue, our annual Women of Power issue. This is something that is a real labor of love, because I don't know that, like I said to start the show, the involvement, our sports diversity does not get talked about enough. Like, it is perhaps our strongest suit. How many different people from different walks of life and different backgrounds and different races, ethnicity, I mean, all these things, sexes, ages, I mean, it's all is equal behind the wheel of a race car. And that's the magic of our sport, in my opinion. Where else are you going to see people like Melanie Salemi doing battle against people like Jason Scruggs or Tommy Franklin or Jay Cox, right? I mean, it's an incredible thing that's happening. I'm so proud of it. And we do our damnedest to showcase this strong suit that drag racing has with the annual Women of Power issue. This year, on the cover of DI 181, Drag and Drive star and rising television personality, the one, the only Alex Taylor. Let's give it up.
Woo! Hey, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a gazillion things going on at this point in time. Let's get right into it. I mean, did you ever anticipate this? I mean, I know you're a second generation racer. You've been around this stuff your whole life. And your dad, obviously builds cars and has a business in racing. But did you ever think that this was going to be something that you could pursue as a career and earn a living doing, Alex?
No, it's kind of a complicated question, because the only thing I ever knew was automotive. And so I grew up in, the shop. My mom and dad ran the business together. And so that's the only lifestyle I knew. So it wasn't until like 16, 17, 18 that I realized, I'm like, man, I love this. This is my life. Like, I got to figure out how to make a career. And so I went to school for marketing and all that, and just, got my college degree with that. Cause I was like, I want to make it, automotive based. But I made a post yesterday, and I remember when I was part of the 2016, the second class for the 30 under 30. And I remember when you guys unveiled the cover, and it was a member from the year prior. I was like, man, I wonder if one day I'll ever be, do enough to be on the cover of the magazine. Cause like, you have to, that you have to earn it, you have to have a reason to be there. It's like so cool to be a part of it in general. And so that's when I was like, will I ever do enough? I'm like, whatever, 18 at the time. So I had, there's so many unknowns. So to answer your question, no, I didn't anticipate it or expect it. I just loved what I was doing and hoped that I could stay in it for as long as I could. And it's just snowballed.
Well, I can relate because I remember like barely making it through high school and like walking out into the world, let alone college. I threw in the towel on that pretty quickly, but I remember feeling that same feeling, Alex, like I want to go drag racing. And that's all I want to do. So I'm going to have to find a way. And I wasn't like a welder. I wasn't a fabricator. You know what I mean? I didn't have those skills. And I knew that I was going to have to kind of find my own way. And by the grace of God and a bunch of other things and people, here we are today. It's an amazing thing, but I can totally relate to that situation where it's like, man, this is what I want to do, but there's really not a clear-cut path to accomplish it. I mean, I was going through this before we started the show, Alex, and by being on the cover of the Drag Illustrated Women of Power issue, you're joining a group of people here. This list, I mean, it gives me chills to say it out loud. Alexis DeJoria, Lizzie Musey, Brittany Force, Haley James, Megan Meyer, Melanie Salimi, Jasmine and Gianna Salinas, Callie Mills, Camry Caruso, now Alex Taylor. I mean, that's a really, really cool thing. I mean, do you have any sort of like, does that stir up any emotions in you when you hear your name mentioned alongside those ones?
Absolutely. But it's one of those that like, it doesn't necessarily feel real, until like you look back and think about it. Cause it's like, I see the pictures and send them in and things like that. But then to hear it alongside that list, and I have to stop and take myself out when, like, I remember Lizzie's cover. Like, when I was trying to think of how I wanted mine to look, I was like, I loved her cover. Like, that's just something that stuck out in my mind. And then Callie's, when Callie had hers, like, so I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I remember that made an impact. Or, like the cover that I was talking about, I believe it was Johnny the year that.
Yeah, it was Johnny.
Yeah. And so it's like those covers, I remember from, being the outside looking in on that, how impactful those covers are. And like, to me, seeing those other people and, just a host of other, so many people that are on the covers that I look at and I'm like, man, it's impactful. And so it feels weird when it's you thinking about being on the cover because, it's a different perspective. And so I've reminded myself how I looked at those people on the cover. And I still look at people that come out on cover issues and I'm like, that's really cool. They're doing something really cool. And so it's hard for me to put myself in that position and think, man, I'm doing something cool, because I'm constantly like, what's next? But yeah, to answer your question, it's one of those to join those names and to be alongside those people and to have seen what they've done. Like, it's surreal actually to know that I can be on that list as well. So.
Well, we're very proud to have you on there, Alex, and we truly believe you wouldn't be if we didn't think you deserved it. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we're proud of at Drag Illustrated is we feel like we're one of the only places that exist in our sport where all of y'all are lumped together, right? I mean, our sport's very cliquish, right? I mean, and that's kind of natural. I don't know that it's a bad thing. It's just a thing. And you've got the drag and drivers, you've got the radial folks, you've got the no prep folks, you got the pro mod people, the nostalgia folks, the sportsman racers, the big money bracket racers, right? There's all these different communities. And what we're proud of when I roll through that list of, DeJoria, Musey, Force, Haley James, Megan Meyer, I mean, it's top alcohol dragster drivers, it's funny car racers, it's no prep kings folks, it's motorcycle racers, it's pro stock racers, it's street outlaws and drag and drivers. I mean, I love that eclectic mix because that's what, when we started Drag Illustrated, I didn't want it to be one of those things where you had to be sponsored by the US Army or Castrol to be recognized. Like, everybody's spending all the money they can. Everybody's working as hard as they can. And everybody that I encounter in this sport has a story to tell, and I don't know that it matters where you what tickles your fancy as far as going racing, what kind of car it is, excuse me. Everybody's got a story to tell. So we're genuinely excited to have you join that Women of Power alumni. Let me ask you this, Alex, your life has changed dramatically. You're out on the West Coast filming TV shows. We're interrupting a day of filming right now. What is next? You talk about what's next. I mean, we saw you dabble in Radial versus the World racing, Pro 275, I think a little bit, ran some 3-second passes in the 8th mile at over 200 miles an hour, which is absurd. You made some 6-second, 200 plus mile an hour passes in the family hot rod on Sick Week this year. What is your racing career? Like, what are your aspirations away from the camera look like at this point in time?
So that's one of those where the question of what's next is almost one of my least favorite questions. I'm not saying it's a bad question to ask, but when I personally think about it, because the thing I say is, like, if I set a goal so stiff and, like, my eyes are on the goal and that's the only thing I can focus on, I know I'm going to miss so much other stuff along the way. It's like with Bumblebee, the Pro Mod, the Radial versus the World car, I would have never driven that had I not been doing an NMCA shootout with our 55. Like, that opportunity wouldn't even happen. So that's an example I like to tell people, is because it's like, one of the things that I wanted to do was drive a Pro Mod. That was on my list. That's like something that I really wanted to. And if I had only been focused on that, I don't think it would have happened at the time that it happened. So everybody's like, what's in 5 years? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow is, and I like that. I'm okay with it. It's just, I know what I love doing. And I know that I love all these different aspects of the industry. And I know that I want to keep learning and growing. And so I trust that I'm going to set up stuff where hopefully it opens opportunities to continue happening. But on the driving side, something I do know is that that's really what ignites a spark in me. Drag racing is one of those that when Nate was asking me questions for the issue, for the article that just came out, he asked, he was like, what hat are you most proud of? And I'm like, being a drag racer. Like, I don't get to compete as much as I would necessarily like. And I always question myself. I'm like, am I doing it enough to consider that? Where do I actually fall? But it's one of those that I know I want to build another car. I know I want to go faster. Dad and I talk about, like, what class or where we want to go, if we want to keep doing drag and drive, or if we want to switch and we want to go, like, race more competitively and things like that. So I don't know. I don't know. I just know that I'm not stopping. I'm not at a point where I want to stop or slow down. I just want to go faster and find that next place. And I don't know what that is yet.
What do you make of the drag and drive scene right now? I mean, obviously healthy, I think, for sure. But one of the things that we've talked about here on this show is a potential for, like, oversaturation. Like, there's so many of these events, it's growing rapidly, and that's all, like, super exciting. But you do wonder at some point where it's like, okay, are there enough cars? Are there enough people? Is there enough fans? Like, is there enough interest as a whole to keep all of these things healthy? Because you raise a great point. What is the class that your car competes in? You're the 55 Chevy.
Now that they've changed the rules, I fall in unlimited iron. So it's like unlimited, but it's you can still have a still body car. You have to have still body. So that way it's a little bit heavier class. So the 55. Now, when we first started, it was unlimited, but it wasn't as competitive there because that's where you have Bailey and Schroeder and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel, honestly, and it's probably a controversial, people probably feel one way or the other about it, where Drag and Drive's at. It is healthy. There's, magazine, Bailey has his magazine now. There's, I think, 20 plus events. But with that said, I don't feel like there's enough cars. Like Drag Week, for example, it sold out in 30 minutes. That's the slowest it's ever, in years that it's sold out. And I just feel like, now you have Drag and Drive starting in February now with Tom. And so Drag Week's not even until September. So it's like the amount of cars, like, you're taking a week off of work every time. And it's just the time dedication, the wear and tear on the car, and the fact that the car has to be so specifically built to compete there. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out, but seeing Drag Week not sell out as quickly as it has in the past, I find that interesting. So I don't know.
I think that's really insightful, Alex. I appreciate your candid response, because I know that it is kind of a controversial take. Like, everybody gets up in arms about these things really quickly, but I think there's some truth to what you're saying. One of the things that I've looked at is maybe they're going to, they being, the Drag and Drive masses, I almost wonder if we're going to have to find a way to steer more of the attention toward some of the slower cars. Like, let's build some stars in, the class that like a CTSV Cadillac would be in, or a late model Camaro or Mustang, because you can clearly build stars. I don't know. I mean, the list we just named off of Women of Power cover features, it's very, I don't think you have to race in Unlimited. I don't think you have to race against Tom Bailey or you to develop a following. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's turn somebody with a street, like a 9-second street car into a superstar. You know,
you just have to have that balance. And that's something that I found interesting. Like, don't get me wrong. I think it's healthy. I think it's growing. I think it's in a good spot right now. It's just that when it's a lower, I don't want to say that wrong. Like, you can enter with anything. You can enter with such a wide range of cars, kind of like you're saying, you could enter with a 14, 15 second car all the way to a 5-second car,
right.
And so I think it's one of those, it's interesting because instead of having like, you do have classes that you step up in. However, like, you have 15-second and 5-second cars racing at the same time. So you have people that are sometimes new to drag racing coming into something where there's people that are veterans, so to say, racing. And so figuring out, it's like training grounds right there where it's like how the event works and runs and things like that. And so it's just like, there's such a wide mindset of how the event should be run and things like that, so that's something that I think is probably the most difficult thing right now, because you don't want to run into a situation where it's overruled. That's kind of my take. And that's something that I saw kind of with Sick Week. It's like, well, that's not a rule. That's not a rule. That's not a rule. It's like, well, wait. We don't want to overrule ourselves into non-existence, like, we just got to find the right balance of like keeping true to what the drag and drive stuff is while not putting it too much in a box. But I think there's a way to bring people up and make them stars, and I think people are doing it. There's not that many fast, the unlimited cars that are competing. You have Bailey and Schroeder and, such. So if we saw some more of those entering, Goldstone, Steve Morris, it's just, that's a small handful. So that class, you don't see a lot of new people coming into that. So
it's really an interesting thing, because I think that the drag and drive movement was built on the back of those, the Larry Larsons and Jeff Lutz, and then that whole deal. And then Tom Bailey enters the fray. And at that point in time, you had like 3 heavyweights, and I think that they created a lot of interest. And that has, I almost wonder if it would be cool at some point in the future for the drag and drive deals to, what do you say? Like kind of what we did with World Series of Pro Mod, where go enlist the talent, don't let it be a come one, come all, or however many entries. Say, hey, we're bringing out these 5 guys, and then we're going to focus all of our energy on these 5 guys. And it's going to be, these dudes are our dudes, and we're going to celebrate them all season long, and we're going to follow what they do. Does it make sense? Like, instead of like hoping people show up, more be like, hey, listen, I don't know if money has to get involved or what has to happen, or I got to tell you, and I got to be weary of like wrapping up airing out all of like our conceptual secrets or whatever. But man, it's true. Everybody wants what no one else has. Like, if you turn some people away or say like, hey man, we were only taking 6 unlimited entries this year, or we're only taking 4. I really think that they may be surprised how much that drives the bus. Because people are like, oh shit, I want to be one of those 4.
I want to be one, I can't have it. Yeah. No, and I agree. And that's one of those things where I guess was kind of what I was alluding to, where it becomes a little bit complicated, because you have, say you go to an NHRA race or something, Top Fuel and Funny Car and stuff like that is the draw. So to an extent, don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing sportsmen. That's what makes the event. But I'm just saying, for the person that's coming maybe for the first time, that's the draw. That's what, everything's covered on. And so unlimited and like those fast car classes is kind of what Drag Week is also, that's the draw. They advertise Tom Bailey's 5-second car, or Dave Schroeder's car. And so it's one of those of hopefully finding an understanding where by promoting those guys that are fast and things like that, you're not taking anything away from somebody who has a 15-second car or a 12-second car. You're not taking anything away. You're just helping to like hopefully help the event grow and progress as it moves forward, and like take those people that are in the 15 and they'll slowly progress and go faster. And so I think it's just finding that understanding of, highlighting those people while trying to make sure those that are in the different classes understand
Agreed.
that it's not negative, it's a positive. Like, we're trying to help the sport grow, or that's part of the sport grow.
I agree wholeheartedly. It is. I mean, it's none of these things are easy, right? It's not an easy thing to solve. A couple of things here, Alex, that I just want to run through. What's it been like? I mean, you're working at Hot Rod Magazine, like Motor Trend. I mean, these are like iconic brands that have been around since what seems like the beginning of time.
Yep.
I know that the hat you love to wear is race car driver, but man, you really seem to be embracing the role of a TV personality. We saw you at the Dodge Last Call event. Fantastic job. What do you make of this kind of new turn in your career?
I mean, I do love that as well. And it's something Hot Rod is, just as a brand, is it's so important to me. Seeing that Drag Week was a Hot Rod, that's a Hot Rod creation and things like that. It feels full circle for me to get to work for Hot Rod when my racing started in Hot Rod. And so it's one of those that's surreal. And to me, like, it is a legacy brand. We're celebrating 75 years this year. We're working on some really, really iconic cars, and we're doing a land speed car as well to celebrate like the beginning of Hot Rod Magazine and what they actually initially covered. We're doing a 32 Roadster with a flathead and stuff like that. And so getting to like tell the history of the racing and these projects and the way stuff has grown and, history of this car, that's something I really like, because I just want to make sure the industry and the automotive culture continues to grow. And I'm, on the young side of it. And so I'm still learning, I don't know anything by far, but I love getting to learn and share that and be on the show and share that, and working for a brand that just carries so much weight. Like, it's such a responsibility, but it's also so cool to be able to share, my take and knowledge and stuff and learn at the same time. So it's so cool.
Agreed, 100%. Iconic brand, 75 years. I mean, that's hard to even really wrap your head around, right? I mean, it's incredible to be that visible and that significant for that amount of time. I mean, some of the most successful businesses in the world only last 20, 30 years. I mean, seriously. I mean, there's like I can't remember what the stat is off the top of my head, but how many Fortune 500 companies are only really relevant for like 20 or 30 years? So to be an outlier like that, a company that's been successful for over 7 decades, it really is an incredible thing. So let me ask you this. If you were to win the lottery, right? And like, would you have your dad build you a tube chassis car, like a Pro Mod? Because I know he could do it, right? Has he thrown that around?
I mean, we've talked about it, like that's something that we have discussed. And we're for sure going to build another car. It's just what that car is, So yeah, right. I mean, if I won the lottery and money wasn't a question, we could do any engine combination and have spares and backups and this, that, and the other, then like, yeah, of course. So right now it's finding that balance of budget and speed and class and where we can go and be competitive. And I don't know what that looks like, but
it's funny. I remember walking into that little restaurant that we went to on Sick Week, not this year, but last year, that little one on the water. Right. Yeah. And we were all sitting at that table. And when we were walking in, and I like fell in love with your pops. Like, I have like a crush on him. And we were walking in there and he looked at me and he goes, "Man, I don't think we would be happy like pro stock racing." He was like, "We just like, we like the grind, like we love the adventure that drag and drive racing represents." He goes, "I think if I brought a car to the track and like knew that more than likely it was all going to go fine and we were going to make 3 qualifying runs and, best case scenario 4 elimination runs," he goes, I think I would be bored out of my mind. I don't know that you can ever take him out of that drag and drive scene. He's built for it.
I know he gets tired, because like we'll be in the middle of it and he's like, "Geez, can't something go right?" But everybody is like that,
Right.
But when we did the deal with Bumblebee and he's just having to sit over there and twiddle his thumbs. It's this, and then it's this, and then it's the pace. And then he's like, "Can we go home yet?" And like, he's kidding, but it's funny because he's like, he's bored because he's not having to do anything. So we have considered the option of doing something where it's go to the track, set up, and not have all these made up rules, because like, that's the funny part about when you think of drag and drive, it's a bunch of made up rules that we're all following. Like, it's the Bible, basically, like we follow it right. Like this. And it's like, you go to an actual race and then you're like, wait, that person can walk into my pit and help me. Like that's
Right.
that's okay, you know. And so it's one of those. I think we want to try different stuff, but I don't think we can get away fully. And I don't want to, you know, get away fully from like the drag and drive, because it's such a different adventure, you know, and it's just it's a different community. The people that are watching, everybody's so hardcore, and they just are genuinely happy to be there. So, I mean, I don't want to leave it by any means, but
I totally get it, because it really is a unique thing. It's still to this day one of the coolest things. That I hate that it took me like so long into my life to go experience that, like, or get like a big bite, you know, and go do several days of it and see how the community interacts and the way everybody kind of rallies around one another. And obviously it's competitive and there's always exceptions to that rule, but it really is kind of an amazing thing to see, like pulling into the local ice cream shop and there's just people everywhere. I mean, cars on Projects or whatever, you know what I mean? In the parking lot of a Dairy Queen. It's just a cool thing. So, so last thing, the Dodge Last Call event was, so reading the cover story in Drag Illustrated this issue, it sounds like you weren't even totally familiar or aware of what you'd really gotten yourself into with that event. I wasn't there, but I did watch a ton of videos from it. What a production, right? I mean, were you shocked? I mean, the helicopter thing, that was huge, no doubt. But I mean, just like the TVs and pyro and lights. I mean, what a deal, eh?
It was insane. And I'd never done a live event before, not like that. And so it was funny because they called me while I was working at Hot Rod Garage, and I'm like, walked outside and I'm just pacing back and forth. And she's our kind of like our in between, they call it a talent rep, but whatever. She works for Motor Trend. She handles stuff like that and correlates those things or sends that to me. So she calls me. She's like, hey, do you want to come to the Dodge Last Call event in Vegas? I'm like, well, yeah, duh. Like, what's the catch, you know? And she says, you know, do you want to work with Dodge for it? And I was like, yeah. But she knows I don't want to do anything if it's EV. Somebody's going to shoot me on that. But I just didn't want to. I didn't want to, you know? And so that's the only thing. I was like, if it's not EV, then yeah. If it is, then, you know, I need to hear more about it. So she's like, no, it's not. You'll want to be a part of it. And I'm like, okay. And so like this thing, like we didn't really hear much about it. Didn't hear much about it. Finally, like it comes up and I know nothing about what the car is. They're like, we can't tell you any details. You can't see it, like nothing. So I'm like, okay, this is like really weird. Like I'm going into a test and I haven't studied, but it's not my fault. And so we're kind of like the week of, we start to become in contact with the production, the guy that's running the production. And he's sending like these different run throughs of like what the timeline is going to look like and all this. And I'm like kind of panicking because I'm like, I don't even know how to read this. Like, I don't know how to read the schedule. It says toss here, throw there, and all this. And I'm like, do I speak up now and say I don't know what I'm doing, or am I going to freak everyone out? So I didn't say anything. And so then like the day of the event comes up and they hand me this sheet and they're like, this is the final version. But in case the helicopter can't take off, here's the second version. You need to have this person here for this interview. You're going to have a voice of God in one ear. You're going to have the production on the other side and like all this. And I'm like,
is that what they referred to it as, the voice of God?
Yeah.
That we're working that into our program moving forward. Somebody listening on my team, figure out the voice of God, and I want it to be mine. So that's like, awesome.
I'm like, guys, I know. And so I'm like, I still don't know what I'm doing. And so like we do our sound test. We don't get to do a run through. And so they're like, there's going to be a helicopter, pyrotechnics, and we're not doing a run through. I'm like, I'm like, guys, I don't know what I'm doing, but I don't want to say anything. And so like 20 minutes before the event, I'm like texting David Freiberger and I'm like, hey, do you have a couple minutes to talk to me? He was like, yeah. So I went up and I'm like showing this paper. I'm like, what do I do here? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't even know how to read this schedule. What do I do? And so like he's coaching me. He's like, you'll be fine. I'm like, okay. So I go out there. I've never dealt with like the voice of God in one ear and the production in this ear and trying to read lips like that. And so at first I'm like trying not to talk, like I'm like my voice sounded very slowed down. And then I called Jay Leno a ghost, like all this stuff. And so it was one of those, I really realized I got myself into something I didn't know what I was doing, but I really enjoyed it. And I feel like that's where you grow, right?
100. I mean, hey, by all accounts, I think you did a great job, including calling Jay Leno a ghost. I don't know that that's like really inaccurate, right? I mean, it's like the ghost of talk show past, I think you could have said.
What happened though was they came through on one ear and they were like, they said like bring up Jay Leno or something, or introduce Jay Leno as our special guest. And then the guy that I was interviewing says, yeah, the Black Ghost. And so like my brain just mixed it, and I was like, and our next special ghost. Jay Leno. And I was like, I just said that. That's embarrassing. But anyway,
nah, you did it right. You just own it, roll with it, you know, and that's what you do. Yeah, I think you did a fantastic job. I got to tell you, I was blown away by the level of production at that event. Can you tell, like, who was the audience there? Like, I thought it was really cool the way they did the grandstands and like had it sectioned off. I think motorsports, drag racing specifically, could maybe learn from that. Like, instead of allowing people to just, you know, sit wherever they want across 7,000 seats. No, you're all sitting right here together. Well, so it looks good.
They did a great job of that, because at first the event, they had racing, just drag racing happening during the day. And it did not look like there was going to be a crowd. And it's like, you guys are getting ready to do an unveil and there's not anybody here. And then like, by the time it came around, like, I was like, these people, I guess, were here and they're just hiding, you know? And so everybody came and sat, and I was so impressed by the crowd, so impressed by the production. And that's something that I think Dodge just does so well, is they're just over the top, you know? And it was like, could they have drove a car in and people cheered? Yeah, but they're Dodge, so they flew it in on a helicopter. And like, I remember I'd heard stories about the helicopter was having trouble getting off the ground. And so like, it was just me and Chris Jacobs standing on the line and no one else. And this helicopter flies over and I look up and I'm like, I'm going to get crushed by the DC 170. Like, that's how I'm going to go out. Like, I see this car swaying up here. I'm like, it could be worse, you know? But
yeah,
they did a great job.
It'd be a hell of a good story moving forward to like tell folks, you know, like I got clipped by a car that fell off a helicopter. I tell you, man, I felt like challenged by it. I was thinking immediately as I was watching it happen, I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to convince somebody. I mean, Spencer Hyde, who won the World Series of Pro Mod, is going to have to be okay with us like pushing his car out of a cargo plane and then it parachuting slowly to the ground or something. I don't know how we one up that.
I don't think you can, you know, but I'm the challenge is out there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alex. Well, hey, thank you so much. Congratulations on all your success. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Get back to work. I know you got to go probably build a hot rod or something. So again, thanks for being a part of this. Congrats. And we'll see you soon. Okay.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye, Alex. All right, guys, real quick, I want to remind you that the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by our friends at Redline Synthetic Oils. Redline has a reputation with racers and hardcore enthusiasts for creating products that perform and protect better than any on the market, and they've been doing it since 1979. Whether it's your race car, your tow rig, your motorcycle, or your lawnmower, when you think about lubricants, you need to think about Redline. For more information, log on to redlineoil.com. I got a cool little story about Redline real quick that I want to share with you guys, because I thought it has been I need to weave in like more personal stories on these script reads. And one of the things I wanted to share is I heard from a prominent Top Fuel team over the weekend that perhaps one of the coolest things that they'd ever experienced dealing with an oil company was the offering of an ear that Redline is always willing to do, always willing to listen, always willing to experiment, always willing to try new things. And I just think that's a really cool thing to share. I mean, whenever you've got a Top Fuel team, I know that a lot of these oil companies are really set in their ways and they do it a certain way and they're never going to vary from that. But it's a really cool thing to hear from a high-level Top Fuel team that the thing that they love the most about Redline is that Redline is an active partner in their race team, like an active member of the team, where if they are having something that they want to try or experiment with, the team at Redline Oils is always willing to listen. And it's not like, you know, you do realize that not always do they need to listen. They probably need to protect, you from yourself, especially when it comes to racers, protect racers from themselves at times. But it is a really cool thing to hear. So keep that in mind when you're making your next decision regarding lubricants and oils, that you want people that are always working, always improving, always listening and paying attention and are willing to be an active member of your team. So log on to redlineoil.com for more information. Guys, we got a lot of ground left to cover in a relatively short amount of time. Mike, JT, we haven't touched much on the PDRA East Coast Nationals. We need to do that. We got to talk about all the other young women that were identified as movers and shakers in the sport of drag racing in this month's Women of Power issue. And I just want to
know more about the voice of God. That's what
Me too.
I want to hear more details on that.
Dude, so I was trying to achieve something like that at World Series of Pro Mod, where we would have like a separate channel and it would be like the overall channel, the Voice of God channel that everybody, but then I'm going, okay, everybody's going to have to be carrying 2 radios or switching channels all the time. People, the layer of complexity of those events, it's hard to really wrap your head around. There's a lot going on at any given time.
Sure.
It is.
Man, but Alex it's so impressive what she's doing, and just so well spoken, and like great analysis of drag and drive and of the industry stuff that's going on. I mean, there's no coincidence. She's been featured in our Women of Power issue multiple times. I want to say 2, 3, 4 times possibly, in addition to other features back when she was driving the Camaro. But to finally have her on the cover is well deserved. And I don't think I've ever seen her post, our post, that we made more positive comments. I haven't seen the first negative comment saying, "Oh, this is a joke. This person doesn't deserve it." We get that on almost everything we post.
Yeah.
But I think everyone can recognize.
We talked about putting her on the
authentic
cover
she is.
over a year ago.
Yeah.
You know, when
we were going to do this a year ago.
Yeah.
But
But think about where she's, you know, a lot of times when we put someone on, you know, maybe they're having an outstanding year that year, but and maybe the next year isn't so good. Man, how far she came in the last year. It's crazy, really.
Well, I'm really proud of it. Yeah. I'm really proud of that, because oftentimes
you can also be proud that I think we had her in the magazine when very few people, I think, had heard of her. And this whole movement was just starting. She was very young at that point, and just to see the growth and see now how she presents herself, and just getting called to do that Dodge deal. She's on TV. I mean, that's a huge leap, and it's all authentic, I think, is what the coolest part of it is.
I agree wholeheartedly. So for this next portion of the show, while we continue to break down the Drag Illustrated DI 181 Women of Power special issue, let's bring a fresh face, right? This is a big moment here on the show.
Can replace me.
That's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, you guys appreciate that.
Yeah, there's no pressure here. Let's give it up for Drag Illustrated senior editor, the one, the only, Kayla Zadell.
Hey guys.
Hey, what's up?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming. Hey, I know for those that don't know, Kayla joined the team here at Drag Illustrated, what, a year ago?
It was like in July of last year, so coming up on a year. Yeah,
not quite a year, but an influencer in her own right outside of the motorsports space, has moved a lifelong drag racer, generational father races, deeply involved in the sport, husband involved in the sport. I mean,
we met her husband before you met her.
That's right. Yeah, and for the record, JT, nobody can replace you. So I'm not looking to replace you.
Yeah,
stop.
Yeah, JT can't be replaced. But no, we're excited to have you. And I told the team that I think it's important that we start highlighting more of the voices here at Drag Illustrated, because it's way more than just me. It's way more than just myself, Mike, and JT. There's a ton of people here that have great perspective, have a story to tell, have an angle that's unique to them. And you certainly fit the bill, Kayla. So we're glad to have you. And I hope this becomes something of a recurring theme. We've got Nate Van Wagen, our editor-in-chief at Drag Illustrated, doing his PDRA live show that he does along with Kyle Christ and Scotty Gore from the PDRA. So these things, hopefully we just continue to do more and more of this. Can you give us just kind of your overarching thoughts on the Women of Power issue? I mean, we have been doing this for over a decade. It's not necessarily new. And to be honest, we could, and we do. I mean, Erica Enders was on the cover of our Racer of the Year issue. So this is back-to-back females on the cover of the magazine.
This is actually the third issue in a row. I was looking at it because we had 2 females on the 30 under 30 cover as well. So this is the third issue in a row with women.
And it's one of our
cover.
most popular issues. I mean, like that I don't know if there's any copies left of that Lizzie cover, years ago.
No, I mean, what do you make of it, Kayla? I mean, just this highlight, this moment taken to recognize women's involvement in drag racing.
I love it. And first of all, I want to say thank you for in the conclusion of it. This has been one of my favorite issues to work on so far. And I love how the cover came out. I love how inside of it came out. I think it's beautiful. I love the layout and everything. And I also love the women that are featured in it, because it's such an inclusive list. It's not just drag racers, but it's, women that are working the scenes, it's content creators. It really spans such a wide variety of women that are in motorsports or drag racing today.
That's, I think, probably one of my favorite things about it as well. We touched on that briefly with Alex, and that's been part of the song and dance here for a long time, is that it's not just the people behind the wheel that are difference makers in this sport. I mean, it's truly a team sport. The success or failure of any one of these racing vehicles is typically tied directly to a group effort. Oftentimes a half dozen people or more. I mean, in Top Fuel Funny Car, there's like 15 people working on some of these cars. So it's a lot of hands go in to making one of these things go up and down the racetrack. And it's cool to highlight all these different people. To your point, this year's Women of Power highlights Shelby Williams, Steve Williams' daughter, Taylor Vetter, top alcohol dragster competitor, Sue Cunningham. I love Mama Sue. She's actually a regular watcher of the show here. And she has such a presence. I mean, she shows up at a Midwest Drag Racing Series event or PRI or the World Series of Pro Mod and has an immediately felt impact. I mean, you cannot, you can't be on the property and not know that she's there with you. She's someone that celebrates the successes of everybody.
She just texted
involved.
me and wanted to thank us all, and she's honored for being in the DI magazine.
Yeah, she's awesome. Exactly the type of person that I think, you know, and I don't mean to stop at Mama Sue, because the list goes on. Tisha Williams, Angie Smith, Brittany Force, Nicole Elf. What did I say?
Williams.
Oh, my bad. What did I? Let me go back.
Tisha Wilson.
Tisha Wilson, Angie Smith, Brittany Force, Nicole Elf, Natalie Torrance. I'm proud of that list, but I go back to Mama Sue because she is really an outlier in that conversation, right? She's the mother of an industry member. She's the mother of a racer. And I just think that you can't, moms and wives perhaps have more impact in this sport than anyone, right? I mean, I think about how many times I've been to the racetrack and seen a loving wife waving their husband into the staging beams, right? Or an embrace between a daughter and a dad, or a husband and wife before bolting into a race car. Like, those relationships are so mission critical. And I think oftentimes because they're not the ones letting off the button or pulling the parachutes, it's overlooked. And like, I don't mean to put words in anyone's mouth, but I don't think Tommy Cunningham wants to go racing without his mom being there. Like, that's how involved she is in the program.
Right. And I love the story on Mama Sue. I think she says in there that drag racing is a family sport. And it really is, because even if it's not a woman behind the wheel, we have wives, girlfriends, daughters, nieces, granddaughters, even, you know, they're helping out. I watched the Winternationals, and somebody that always comes to mind are the two Gordon sisters, you know, Doug Gordon's daughters, because I love, you know, I have an affinity to the alcohol classes, but that's another story. But, you know, they're always there helping out. So it's amazing to see that it's such a family sport, right? You know, I wouldn't be into drag racing if it wasn't for my dad. So it's great that us women are out there carrying the torch.
I agree, Mike. I mean, I know that this is something that you can relate to as well. It really is. I don't mean to repeat myself, but it can't be overstated. Like, I know even here at the magazine, like, I can't do any of this without the support of my wife. You know, she's not in every issue of the magazine, or she's not photographed in there all the time or anything, but like, one doesn't happen without the other. Mike, I know you feel much the same way. Well,
just think about World Series of Pro Mod and our staff and our team. I think who was in that motorhome, it was a very diverse group, and just as many women as men, and wives and daughters. Our whole families were there. So it definitely, you almost can't enjoy it. You can't fully embrace it if the whole family isn't a part of it. And that's why you see so many families. I think that's why it's added to the diversity of the sport. I think, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but in the new issue, there's an article on celebrating 20 years of Right on Track, which had a big influence at that time on young women getting into the sport of drag racing. It's the story of Erica and Courtney Enders, the Disney movie. And there's a fact in there, I think I'd have to pull it up for an exact quote, but I think at that time it was less than 25%.
When the movie, I found it. When the movie was made, when Right on Track was made, the story of the Enders sisters, about 25% of junior dragster drivers were girls. Mm-hmm. Today, 20 years later, and I have goosebumps, that number is closer to 50.
Yeah. I was going to say it's doubled. And honestly, I think you can apply that to all of drag racing. I mean, wouldn't you say that it maybe is not a double, it hasn't doubled in percentage, but across all the categories, there are more women racing. We talk about top alcohol dragster. That's the proving grounds for young women that are wanting to make the leap into the nitro ranks. And again, we talk about the diversity of drag racing, but just the ability for women to compete on the same platform as men and how they've embraced that. Marketers have embraced that a ton. I think that they have gravitated toward the market they can reach by embracing these young women. All that stuff is stuff we don't talk about enough in drag racing.
Right. Like you said, it's a whole nother market that you can reach. It's a whole nother, gender that you can appeal to. And yeah, I think it's great. Like you said, the top alcohol dragster class is a proving ground for those females or women that are looking to jump into top fuel. And I mean, we can't forget about our sportsman racers either. I mean, there are a slew of women out there that are sportsmen's racers.
I wonder sometimes, and this is an interesting, and I would like to get your perspective on this, because we've had conversations here, Kayla, with Erica Enders, and how during her, like kind of throughout her ascension to, I would argue, the absolute peak of drag racing drivers, amongst the best to ever do it, she never really wanted to be necessarily identified as like the best girl. She wanted to be, or the best female race car driver. She wanted to be identified as the best driver. And I totally agree with that. But I oftentimes wonder if we don't celebrate this enough. I mean, because it's not really happening in any other sport. Like the NFL doesn't have, women out on the field with men, right? Major League Baseball doesn't have women out on the field with men. And in most instances, the drop off, like the NBA, and the drop off in fan interest and participation compared to the WNBA is like staggering, right? But
interestingly, though, I don't know if you guys were following the college basketball deal this past weekend, but with the Caitlin Clark, who's kind of like the Steph Curry of women's basketball, and the LSU team, that actually was the big draw of the weekend, was the women's college basketball championship. And I saw so many things about, I've never would have imagined that more people were excited to watch the women's final than the men's final, which happened on Monday. It was kind of a snoozer because UConn was pretty dominant. So that was really interesting. And 9.9 million people watched that game on Saturday afternoon. And that's more than an NFL game draws on Amazon for Thursday nights.
Well, and fantastic, because that kind of validates what I'm trying to say, is that this is a big deal,
right.
and it's clearly possible. Like, it's clearly possible. The NCAA women's final championship game is proof positive that it doesn't really, if the story's there, right? If there's a storyline, and I think that's what was driving the bus on that particular deal, is there's some big stars involved on both teams,
and then some
controversy, coaches,
there was
some controversy.
Yep.
I mean, there was a lot of cast members, right, contributing to that moment. But I look at and I compare it to the sport of drag racing, and I think about like Melanie Salemi and what she's doing in PDRA, and like being a world beater in that scene. Like, that's so unusual. And what Brittany Force has accomplished as a 2-time world champion in NHRA Top Fuel, the highest ranks of our sport. Erica Enders, 5-time world champion. That's not happening in any other motorsport where the women are every bit as competitive and every bit as talented as their male counterparts. I find it really unique. And sometimes I don't know that our sport, maybe we're not excited enough about it. Maybe we're we're trying so hard to make it not about that, but maybe we should. Like, maybe it's okay.
I think, yeah, it's still some sort of a challenge that we have to face today, that it's not such a big deal, that, women are going toe to toe with these men that are out there and proving them time and time again. Erica is a prime example that we can do it better, right? Sorry, but not sorry, because it's true, And like you said, no other motorsport out there has this. It's just drag racing. And I do think it needs to be talked about more. And I think it's great that Drag Illustrated has been doing this, what'd you say, 11 years now, putting this issue out there. And I really do think that it has made waves and is going to continue to make waves.
Well, I feel like, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, because that's probably going to get me in trouble, but it feels like if there's a female involved in any other motorsport, it's gimmicky, right? Like it's like a gimmick. It's like a sideshow attraction. And how tragic is that? because right here in drag racing, like to your point, some of the best the best drivers in the game are females. But we are almost too nonchalant about it. Right.
I think we take it for granted sometimes. And I think it's just because we're so used to it. Right. So I think we need that fresh set of eyes always out there talking about it. They're like, hey, no, we are out there doing this.
And doing it at an extremely high level. So anyways, let's dive into, we talked about the women. We've got the Women of Power special issue, which I know you penned at least one of the features on. I believe the one on Nicole Elf we were talking about earlier in this week, who competed down at the World Series of Pro Mod in the inaugural Extreme Front Wheel Drive Challenge. But we've got a lot of racing left to cover here. So if you're willing, you want to dive into some more racing analysis. Kayla, you going to hang out for a few?
It's up to you guys.
All right. We'd love to have you.
Okay.
We've got to, I do want to touch on Matt Hagan. Let's just close the door on NHRA Pomona. The Winternationals marked the third straight, really, really solid outing for the NHRA. Tip of the hat to the NHRA's marketing department, everybody that's been involved in making the magic of this early season happen. We talked about Justin Ashley, talked about Dallas Glenn. Matt Hagan also scored his second win of the year in Pomona. What I thought may be worth noting, and Mike, perhaps you're well versed in some of these other motorsports more so than I am. Haas automation on the side of that car, a brand that I'm most used to seeing in Formula One competition. Is that correct?
Yep.
So do you guys think that that's meaningful? Is that significant?
I do. I was actually, we were pulling some photos together for an ad that we're going to have in the next issue, and saw the Haas car. It's a good looking car. And I thought that's a great thing, because that's been in NASCAR. That's been in F1. That's a big name. Obviously just in the industry with the CNC machines. But to get that in drag racing, that's probably, I would have to guess that's another thing where Tony was like, hey, I forget what's Haas, Gene Haas, that owns the company. Have you seen this drag racing stuff I'm doing? This is pretty awesome. I know we're partners on this F1 deal and Stuart Haas Racing over here, and we got all this going on. But have you seen this drag racing stuff, man? You should check this out. And the next thing you know, you got Haas on the side of the car. So it's another trickle down effect of having someone like Tony Stewart involved. That's nothing but positive, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Right. And to kind of echo you, Mike, it's about time, right, that he made that jump, because we see Rick Ware, he's made the jump. We've seen Tony Stewart make the jump. So I was glad to see another NASCAR or F1, sponsor or owner make that jump as well into NHRA or drag racing now.
I don't know that enough we named Tony Stewart, I believe, the ambassador of the year.
Yep. Another example of that.
Another example of that ambassadorship going far beyond like talking nice about drag racing on a television broadcast. Like, always appreciated, of course. And anytime that he can talk about all the great attributes the sport of drag racing has to offer, I mean, these are big moves. Bringing some of these Formula One, NASCAR brands and companies over to the NHRA Walk of Life is really, really, really incredible.
And what do you think about the value? I don't know. That may have been some kind of trade out partnership deal. I don't know any of the details of the monetary value of that, but just think of the value that Gene Haas is probably seeing on that versus, I mean, he probably spent as much on that as he does on coffee for the F1 team, know, before noon on Friday or whatever. So it's such a huge difference, and I'm here for it. I'm ready to see more of it.
Right. And for Matt to get the win in that car, I mean, that's awesome to have.
I feel like when I was watching Matt's Winter Circle interview, he didn't like elaborate on it. He mentioned it, first race out for this Haas car, and we put him in the Winter Circle. It wasn't lost on him, the significance of that moment, right? Because we recognize what I recognize is that what this really represents in terms of opportunity is changing the drag racing economy. Right? Because drag racing is still its own kind of unique thing, right? So many of these teams are funded by a well-to-do business owner, right? And the goal is more about like finding a way to not lose a ton of money, like make it pay for itself, minimize the bleeding, right?
Right.
But then I start seeing moves. That's not the case in NASCAR. People are starting NASCAR teams. Mike and I talked about this off the record earlier in the week, like, or on the phone, that there's a bunch of charters that came available in NASCAR, and like people are gobbling those up because they see it as a business opportunity to make money or buy something that's going to appreciate over the course of time. That economy hasn't really existed in drag racing, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I don't think it ever would have happened, to be honest, if Tony Stewart didn't choose to go drag racing. Like, I mean, I think that he may well hold the key, that single individual, to a whole new era of drag racing, which has pluses and minuses. Like, I think that there are people that would argue that it's potentially problematic, because if a bunch of this Formula One or NASCAR, IndyCar money arrives in drag racing, it may well mark the end of some of these lesser funded independent teams. But I almost feel to some extent that may be the cost of progress.
That's always been the case, though, in the fuel ranks.
Yeah.
I'm good. I don't want to see something like Haas show up in a pro mod or something, because that's been the problem there, and it really would upset the apple cart to me, even more so than it already has in pro mod. But we almost need to get back to some of these mainstream sponsors in the fuel classes. Like, you know, we used to have the beer wars. You had McDonald's,
right?
Brute, Skull. I mean, all these
Copenhagen, all these tobacco companies.
Yeah. And they're all gone. And now it's mainly, I mean, we got like DHL and a few things like that, but
that's
mainly
a B2B deal, right?
Yeah. B2B or automotive parts. So the more mainstream, the better. And I say that we need to welcome that stuff. And that's another thing that Tony can bring.
And one of the JTs, JT, bring yourself back in here, because JT typically has a really strong opinion on this. This is something that him and I kind of have gone back and forth on. What JT, if he had to, I'm putting words in your mouth, T.
I'm scared what he's going to say next. I don't have no idea, JT.
I don't either.
Well, one of the things that JT has told me that he doesn't like about drag racing is how often the best drivers don't have the best rides, right? Because they don't, like, he gets frustrated, and we've had these conversations where it's like, dude, that guy's, all you talk about is how good he is. Like, why isn't he in one of these high level cars? And it's like, well, because he doesn't have any money.
I know, and it's bullshit. I mean, it really is. Like, you should be working towards, like, if you're the best driver out there, somebody ought to be paying attention and pulling you over and going, you know, you need to come here and race for us, and we're going to give you the best stuff. And I mean, that's what you, in any sport, that's what you're working towards. So that's
drag racing, by and large, doesn't really have that. I mean,
you were just talking about F1. Like, you have a bad day there, you may not be on the team next week, you know, like, you know.
Right.
And so, but that identifies, that shows the other side of the coin, right? It's leading edge or bleeding edge. So we have to be careful what we wish for, to a certain extent, because for me, and this is a fun conversation to have, is it good or bad, right? Part of it is good, that I don't have to be, like, if I've got the money to go nitro funny car racing, I can go tomorrow, right? You know, I mean, it's doable. But that is also kind of part of the problem, because it shouldn't be about whether or not you have the money to do it. It should be about whether or not you have the talent to do it.
Right.
Right. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
And that bleeds over into the spectators, I think, you know, when you're watching it, like, you know that, you know, Michael Jordan's the GOAT or whatever, and he's going up against whoever that week, you know. I mean, it's not that Michael had a bunch of money, you know, he does now, you know, but it's you know what I mean? It's, you're watching the best of the best. And I think that's what, when we watch sports, that's what we want to see.
Right. But oftentimes in our sport, it's not about having the best driver. It's about being like, hey, I'm the one spending all the money, so I'm the one stomping on the loud pedal. Period.
And I don't blame them.
I don't either.
You know, like, I've also don't understand that, being a car owner. Like, if I'm spending the money, I'm driving that son of a bitch.
And I think that's a lot of what happens, and that's why this issue you're talking about, JT, a lot of these guys are like, I'm driving this thing. I'm not gonna invest all this money, and then even though this driver may be better than me, hell no, I'm driving this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a stepping stone, or that's the fine line. You know, do we want to go out and crush everybody's soul and be like, you know, the team to beat, or are we just gonna, you know, just keep chugging along here with spending the money and me driving? You know, I guess, I mean, there's a line there. Could
it be argued that other sports have done a better job turning you mentioned the LSU game, the LSU Iowa basketball game. I don't know the lady's name. My wife would tell you, the one that dresses all flamboyantly. That's the coach of LSU, but she's like a superstar, famous person. Kim Mulkey.
I'd never heard of her until the start of this past weekend. Okay. And they did like this highlight reel of all her outfits and how she's like a psychopath on the court, like yelling at the refs and stuff. I'm like, how does she not get ejected?
She looks like she needs to be coaching cheer or something, you know?
But I bring that up because, and this is something that we didn't execute at World Series of Pro Mod that I would like to execute moving forward. But here's the thing, drag racing can contribute to this, in my opinion. Like, we can contribute to solving this. Is we have to, as a sport, make being a crew chief, make being a team owner a more celebrated role, right? Because there's a lot of team owners and there's a lot of crew chiefs, but the only ones that most people really know are like Alan Johnson, right? Austin Coyle, who's been retired for a decade. Team owner wise, it's Connie Coletta and Don Schumacher. But like, there's a lot of people in those roles. And I think as a sport, we should probably, like, maybe the ball, I'm going to pass the buck or put the pressure on NHRA. I thought about this. We should make sure that when a team wins, and they've started to do this because of Tony Stewart's involvement, right? But like, when Matt Hagan wins, Tony Stewart needs to hit the media center. You know, they need to have him in front of a microphone. And the same goes for every other team owner. When Clay Millican qualifies #1, put a camera on Rick Ware, right? Because I think that that's something that happens in other sports that doesn't happen in ours, right? Like, the coach, after a Patriots game, Bill Belichick's going to the podium. Like, you're not wondering if you're going to hear from Bill Belichick. You're going to hear from Bill Belichick. And it's Dana White. Before and after almost every UFC event, you hear from the president. You know, his perspective on
media
it, what he thought.
More, I feel like that goes back to, there's more resources, there's more media to handle all of that, and more time to fill. Like, let's get the owner, let's get the coach, let's get all this. And we just don't have that in drag racing. It's like, all right, we have 3 seconds here before this next car fires up.
Right.
Let's get the crew chief. That's it. Or let's get a top end interview with the driver. And it's very limited. And then it's off and it's over. And that's where we talk about shows like this and the other podcasts that have popped up, and the other ways we talk about the sport in between races, where they just have that covered in these other sports and have so many gaps to fill. So they want to talk to these guys.
And I'm not saying, you know, and that there's some great, you know, some of the best, you know, drag racers where they need to be, you know. What I'm saying is, you know, and you're talking about the mainstream sponsors and stuff, and maybe that's where you lose the ball a little bit, is that some of those guys probably don't want to jump on board with a team that's just going out and not winning, and not, you know, that doesn't have maybe the best driver in the seat, you know. So, I mean, you know, all that works together. I think, you know, you have to have everything in place for all that to work.
Right. Such a balance, and it can be a double-edged sword too. Right.
Yep.
But yeah, I think all roles, especially owner, crew chief, needs to be celebrated, or, you know, there needs to be some light shown on them.
I think this is something too you would see more celebrated if we had the Netflix Drive to Survive type documentary behind the scenes. That's where you sit down and see all these owners and all these other non-driver team members get their due, and you kind of become fans of them, and you start to watch the sport more because of these other personalities and people that are involved. And that's another reason why we need something like that, which we hear is possibly in the works. We've heard rumors from various sources of some different things that are in the works. I think NHRA recognizes that. NHRA is really the only group in our sport that would have the resources to pull off something like that, or something close. So I think it's on them to sort of get that ball rolling, in my opinion.
I agree. And I think that I will issue that challenge to NHRA, because I think that they can contribute. What we have to do is reverse engineer. Everybody goes into these deals with everybody derives value in different ways. But I do think that we can kind of set this whole conversation headed in the right direction if there was a focused effort to celebrate these other stakeholders, not just the drivers. Because if NHRA, we may find that what I believe, and I'm speaking in crazy generalities here, but motorsports, drag racing, it's an ego thing, right? Me, talk about me, put me on camera, interview me, talk about me. Like, I know that the thrill of racing obviously is part of it. I totally understand that the sensation, the acceleration, the adrenaline, all those things definitely are part of it. However, if NHRA could start to reverse engineer that, hey, our team owners are going to be celebrities. Our crew chiefs are going to be celebrities, not just the men and women behind the wheel, but we are going to make a focused effort to turn team owners and crew chiefs into superstars over the course of time, not something that happens immediately. It happens, you start this process in 2023.
And I think we've tried to start that, haven't we,
it.
with Tuner of the Year and,
yes.
and the DI awards. And I think you need that. That's your coach of the year and your,
but and for me, if I'm just, I can't name anybody because it'll piss someone off. But if I'm like a team owner driver, right? If I'm a team owner driver and it's like well known that maybe I'm kind of the weak link, right? I'm the one with the bank account, but I've got the best of everything. But I'm not. And here's the fact, names,
bro.
I know. But you know the point I'm trying to make. If we can make being a team owner or a whatever a celebrated role where you're going to get plenty of airtime and you're going to get a microphone put in your face, and you're going to get
maybe they'll
to go to the press center. Maybe they would get out of the way a little sooner, because right now, if you're going to get on TV drag racing, you're probably going to need to drive a nitro car and you're going to need to, you're going to need to win or blow up.
Yeah.
Right. So if NHRA or Fox or whomever started to put a little bit more onus and followed like our lead, to be honest with you, that I think would be significant. I think Richard, there's a comment here from Facebook, Richard Freeman, Pro Stock. Are any other team owners in Pro Stock even, could anybody name them? Obviously there's not a bunch of them. But like, I don't think you could even identify. I don't know that there is a more visible team owner in pro drag racing right now than Richard Freeman, John Force. Don Schumacher is no longer really a regularly visible person at the racetrack. Still has a small, share of a team, but Connie Coletta, still at least known. But he's
Jim Dunn, and I think about, honestly, in my opinion, in the fuel ranks, Jim Dunn gets as much camera time as any team owner because he's up there. He starts the burnout and he stages them up, and so does Richard Freeman. He stages up all the elite team cars, and that gets him a good bit of camera time as well, and it makes him available for those interviews. You kind of it goes both ways. You got to make yourself available.
Well, and I've had that conversation with Richard, where I told him, like, hey man, if you want to be a central part of the story, you've got to make that conscious decision to be a central part of the story. I don't give about any interviews. And it's like, nah, I get you're going to say that, right? Because that's the story, that's the shtick. But that stuff makes a difference. And I tell I teach it. It's one of the things that I preach. Like, the quicker you can become famous in your industry or a celebrity of any kind in your industry, the easier life will be. Your sales will go, every part of your life will get easier. People will take your calls. People will reply to your emails. They will reply to your texts. Like, that's important. So building that celebrity, I just think it's something that could be looked at and maybe will have a long-term positive impact on the sport of drag racing. If we can make that role a little more celebrated, maybe we will have guys retire. You know what I mean? Hey, here's one that comes to mind.
You want to retire and you want them to stay at the track, because that's the problem, right? When they lose interest or when they get out of the driver's seat, they don't want to go anymore.
I ain't a good spectator.
Yeah. Right. We talked about it.
That's exactly what it is, man. It's so true. They want to drive until literally they're in a wheelchair.
Is a lot of work,
Yeah.
But think about John Force, right? I think that John's in the, what do they call it? The
twilight.
The twilight of his career, no doubt. He is the GOAT. I don't know that there's anybody who's contributed to drag racing success or whatever, wherever we're at as a sport, more so than John Force. But I think he recognizes that, man, I'm not really in a game where being a coach or someone on the sideline is going to move the needle, right? He needs to be behind the wheel. We've argued before that NHRA needs him to drive. They need him to be visibly involved. Right, because he has significant star power.
All the apples in the John Force basket for so long.
Yeah, but so how do we, how do we put John in a situation where it's just as interesting and just as exciting to have him as a team owner? And I think it starts with sticking a camera in his face, right? I mean, sticking a camera in his face when he's standing behind Brittany's car, stick a camera in his face when he's standing behind Austin Prock's car.
I was thinking about that, man. When I was watching NHRA TV when that whole deal happened with J.R. Todd, and I'm thinking, oh man, this is bad. This is terrible. Then I started thinking, this is not terrible. And I bet John is looking at it that way. It is, if you're J.R. Todd, it is from a monetary standpoint, but from an exposure standpoint, they interviewed John, and John's just kind of talking like, everything's all right or whatever. And John's thinking, well, yeah, that kind of sucks. And that was a bad deal, but I'm going to be the reason that this is on ESPN later. And sure enough, I said it to my wife. I said, watch, this is the only kind of stuff that gets drag racing on ESPN is if it's John Force, or if it's Crash, or if it's Explosion, or if it's a combination of those, then hell yeah, it's definitely getting on ESPN or Sports Center. And sure enough, there it was. So, it's only the bad stuff that gets us the exposure, unfortunately, and we've got to change that too.
Yeah, that's too bad. Like Brittany's Forces runs could have made it on Sports Center last year, for all the records she broke, and it's just too bad that they didn't make it on there. But not sure what I missed. The internet's been in and out here today in Indiana because of the storms and stuff that's coming through. But
is there bad weather out that way?
Yeah, we've had like tornado warnings and stuff. So yeah.
Dude, I took Matt. It was my little boy's birthday. He's not so little. He's like a foot taller than I am now. Max turned 15 on Sunday, and I took him to an escape room in downtown Fort Worth. And dude, tornado sirens started, and I'm like, "Is that a fire truck?" And I looked at Max, and Max like, "I don't think that's a fire truck, Dad." And I'm like,
it's part of the escape room. It's part of the
I know.
That's what you're thinking.
We're a mile away, and they're like, "Oh my God, is this already started?"
They're like, evacuate, and you're in an escape room.
Like, I'm trying.
That's kind of a pin. Next time you need to ask, like, what's the plan if a tornado hits this deal? Like, where do we go?
You know what? Now I think I'm going to have to. I think I may have to do that moving forward. That's kind of crazy, to be honest. But no, anyways, I do think that's. We talk about a lot about changing the economy of drag racing, where there is a. What do they always say? Like the quickest way to become a millionaire in drag racing is to start out as a multimillionaire, right? You know what I mean? Because you're going to lose all your money going racing. And at some point, if we really want this sport to grow, we have to find a way to change that return on investment, right? I mean, we're going to have to find a way to make it a valuable thing to own a pro drag racing team. Like people can't buy an NFL team fast enough, can't buy an NBA team fast enough. Like because it's a fantastic investment. It's going to rapidly appreciate. It's a money-making endeavor. And I do think that drag racing, to be honest, especially at the highest levels, NHRA, in many ways, this sport has succeeded in spite of itself. Right?
Didn't UFC just buy WWE for almost $10 billion?
Their parent company did. Yeah. The parent Endeavor bought it, and so now they're basically part of a conglomerate, right? But that's valued at like $21 billion. So, I mean, the point, in my opinion, is I wonder if at some point the fact that the NHRA is a nonprofit that contributes to this conundrum that we're talking about, right? Because it's about making money. I don't care what anybody says. We're all passionate. We're all excitable folks. We all love this stuff. But at the end of the day, like when the rubber meets the road, it can't just be an L indefinitely. I think the sport of drag racing, and again, we've got to be careful of like lumping everybody in. That's part of the magic of what we do. But specifically at the pro ranks, the highest levels of drag racing, we have been way too reliant for way too long on the philanthropic efforts. Like, man, thank God Don Schumacher really loves drag racing. Thank God Connie Coletta really loves drag racing, right?
Right. But that's the difference, though. Like, what is the top? Because you talk to someone that's down here racing pro stock, that's where they want to be, and then you got the fuel ranks and, so what is the top and is there a way to work up to that? And you see what I'm saying? Like for the spectator,
do you think that the success of No Prep Kings,
right, to sell
is the success of No Prep Kings and the enthusiasm that exists around that style of racing and all this clamoring to get on the show. I mean, we saw guys build cars, buy cars, travel around the country trying to earn their way onto the show. They're doing that because they know it's a good investment, right? If they get on the show,
and they weren't doing it to go to
they're
the
going to make money.
Or the Friday night show, they're wanting to be on the show, they're wanting to be in the invitational. So they're
willing to go put in the time
and the work to work their way up, and you have one class basically at the top.
No, it's a very interesting conversation that I think honestly could go on a long time, but it really is fun to talk about. So anyways, let's,
how the hell did we even get on that conversation?
Talking about
looking at my notes. Looking at my notes here, I don't see anything about all that, but that was good.
You don't look at them notes, Mike.
Yeah, I just realized that I spent all this time on this show rundown.
He types up these notes and and he gives them to you what, 3 minutes before the show's getting ready to go on, and I didn't even open this time. I'm like,
JT is the what's the word? I can't think of the word. The contrarian, right? He's not gonna look at these notes.
We're not gonna go
I think we're on closing thoughts and post takeaway.
Okay. Well, real quick, I do want to just give a shout out. Let's do a selfish thing. Let's talk about how well our World Series of Pro Mod drivers did at the PDRA season opening East Coast Nationals. Does that sound good? Let's do that.
Yes.
So we'll start at the top. Pro Boost and Pro Nitrous, depending on who you ask. Incredible car counts. Were you surprised by the car counts, Mike? I mean, 18 cars in Pro Nitrous, 25 cars in Pro Boost, speaking to the strength of Pro Modified across the country. Melanie Salemi taking the top spot in WS Construction Pro Boost with a 358 at 206. Yep. Really, really stout run from that team.
But they always have a great turnout at Goliath. I feel like for the season opening race, indoor slammer country, everybody's eager to get out there. So no surprise there. The numbers they were running, the weather was really good for a couple of days. Then it changed a lot. It changed dramatically throughout the weekend. But it's interesting to compare the performances of the boosted cars at PDRA versus what they ran at World Series with our slightly different rule set. So that was interesting to me. What do you think about that, Wes?
I was, to be honest with you, I mean, because I was like freaking out. I'm like, holy crap! Like these things everybody's going so fast. Like it seems. But
we tried to keep them out of the
conditions.
We tried to keep them out of the 50s, and I think it's for that reason. I mean, if you look at the Pro Nitrous spread, which both fields were just incredible and so tight, just like it's kind of like what we saw in World Series where you had so many cars separated by such a small spread. But you look at the gap that exists there between the nitrous cars and the boosted cars, and you're seeing a little bit more of a gap than you saw at World Series. And that's what we were shooting for, obviously, with a combined format. So pretty proud of that, and not to jump around too much, but Pro Nitrous, I think we're seeing the effect of these slightly bigger engine combinations. I think we saw on the sheet 973, 974, 975 listed as far as the cubic inches. From these guys taking the 959 with the new crank and rods and making them a little bit bigger. And I think we're seeing that pay off. I think we saw like Ricky Smith went out there and laid down some really good runs for him because he's not a traditional outlaw racer. He's much more attuned to, running his stuff. No, he doesn't want to tear anything up. He's there for the long haul. But I think he qualified second, right? Second or third.
Yeah, he qualified third with a 364 with an 8, like 206, like really, really, really strong run. I count 5 of those new 970 plus cubic inches on the qualifying sheet. And to your point, like we've said this a lot, but I do think it's almost unbelievable how many cars there are in the country of various configurations, screw blower, roots blower, pro charger, turbo, nitrous, that can run mid 360s. And that's what we've been saying all along, is that there's just a massive inventory of cars that can run 365, 66, 67. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of those cars. But to your point, I mean, it took a 364 with a 4 to qualify in Pro Boost.
Yeah.
I mean, that.
And Ricky was a 364 with
an 8 and qualified number 3.
Right.
Yeah.
And
know
so
what I mean?
you see quite a difference there. And shout out to Jay Cox for qualifying number 1. And we had an interesting quote card from Jim Halsey that I saw that we posted a little bit ago, where he noted that the competition has stepped up around him this year. I think everybody's gunning for him. A lot of the ways we talked about the whole elite versus KB deal, I think everybody's like, all right, we got to figure something out here. We need something, because Halsey, with his 4 championships in a row, and you're seeing those guys grouped up around him. He's still got the win. He's still, out there collecting those trophies. But it's going to be interesting this season to see how it plays out with these guys that have maybe found a little bit more power to compete with him.
Listen, I'm as big a Jay Cox fan as there is, but I think Jim Halsey, I felt this felt violent to me. Like, this felt, to me personally, it felt personal. Like, because I'm watching this whole thing unfold, and I'm like, okay, Jimmy's got some competition, man. Jay Cox got a hot rod. Ricky Smith got a hot. I mean, there's a lot of really fast cars. But then just watching how well he executed in eliminations, like, holy moly, his reaction times. There was a double red light in the first round. Jim Halsey and Cam Clark, who's watching along right now. Shout out Cam Clark for being a part of that badass 16 car field out there. But
Cam, you better get ready for Big Dog tomorrow night.
I know, and I got such a sweet.
Mike?
I don't know. I might go. Well, actually,
would
I
you
don't
go?
know the weather's not,
because I got such a nice email from the lady that runs the racetrack.
Oh yeah,
she sent an email and invited us to come, and I thought, man, what a world we live in.
We got an open invitation over there at Big Dog.
I know, but it just made me feel good.
That
was awesome.
Yeah,
you should go.
Oh, weather does look good. Yeah, weather's not coming in until
Friday.
Friday.
Make an excuse later that the weather's too hot. So you better
it's got to be
now.
It's got to be,
like,
I have a real small window of operating environment.
I just look at the runs that Jim Halsey made, 367 with a 0 open round. Then we had Jim Halsey goes 64 with a 9 with a perfect reaction time in E2. E3 goes back up there, 016 on the Christmas tree, 366 with a 1, wins the race over Tommy Franklin, 364 with a 6. I knew they tore up a lot of stuff. They had some mechanical issues that is fairly unusual for that team, but to see them fight adversity and still just look like world beaters. Jim Halsey, earlier at one point last year, we talked about like the Mount Rushmore of Pro Mod drivers. And I perhaps mistakenly excluded Jim Halsey.
Oh, you heard
this guy? This guy is a godlike figure out here at this point in time. And I don't know. They better all pack a lunch. I mean, God bless Jay Cox and Chris Rini and everybody involved. But they're gonna have their hands full.
In one in each holster. Did you see that guy that goes, is it Brian, his crew guy or something? Yeah. Dressed up as Halsey, and he had a belt on with cup holders on either side, had a Coors Light, and he double barrel
kind of guy.
That's funny.
Oh, no. I mean, I just massively impressive weekend of performance out there at the East Coast Nationals. Pro Boost, equally incredible. These rounds of racing were all hitters. Joe Albrecht, Preston Tanner, Spencer Hyde, Randy Weatherford. I was super proud of how well all of our World Series of Pro Mod invitees performed out there. Reminded me of how good these guys really are.
You said the bump was 364 with a 4 in Pro Boost.
364 with a 4. Yeah. Kenny Lang on the bump.
How about Spencer Hyde with the sticker on the back of the trailer?
Yeah.
What a deal, right? I felt you just feel flattered. I feel flattered. I don't know. Like, when I saw that, and then I was here, and just to see all the outpouring of support and adoration or whatever for Spencer Hyde, I just thought that was a really cool deal. That was calculated on our end. Like, we want it to be a big deal. Like, we want it to be a life-changing experience to win the World Series of Pro Mod. And I think that, like, the fanfare that Spencer enjoyed out there, and the cameras and people taking his picture and interviewing him, and Tara Bowker texted me that a longtime Drag Illustrated photographer that shoots all the PDRA races for us. She said whenever Spencer entered the media center, she stood and clapped and encouraged others to do the same. And I thought
That's awesome.
That's really, really cool.
I saw when they rolled that thing out, it looked like it was pretty stripped down. Like they had to take it apart probably to get some of that champagne out. The doors were probably sealed shut.
Yeah. Spencer said he had to wax the car like 3 or 4 times to get it back.
Sorry about that, Spencer, but it was worth it.
That's a tough deal. It really was. I saw Dylan Voss in the comments here talking about Extreme Pro Stock. I think that Extreme Pro Stock started the year strong, and 17 cars at the opener. Really, really impressive turnout. Chris Powers, number 1, 405 with a 0. I mean, we're still waiting on one of these cars to click off a 3-second pass in competition. It's going to happen one of these days, I'm sure, but just a really, really impressive turnout. It was cool to see some fresh faces in the final round. Dwayne Rice, Dylan Voss, Dwayne Rice getting the job done, 410 with a 2, taking out Dylan, who was slightly off the pace, definitely had a car that capable of winning. He'd been 4-0s throughout the day, and definitely had a hot rod, but man, took out the reigning champ in the second round of action, went 005 against Johnny P, right? Just really, I mean, because that to me went 408 with a 0, wins on a hole shot. Johnny goes 406 with a 0. That may have been one of the highlight rounds of racing, in my opinion, but just an absolutely strong start, in my opinion, for the PDRA. 330 cars were on the property by lunchtime on Thursday, according to Tyler Crossnow. I'm going to ask you guys to kind of wrap up the show, and I want to remind everybody again, thanks for being a part of this. Help us spread the gospel of drag racing. Click like, click share, click subscribe if you're watching along on YouTube. What do you make of that car? I mean, is there a healthier organization in drag racing right now in terms of participation?
Man,
it'd be hard pressed to find.
Yeah. And everybody over there, they look at it as a family, I think, you know, so it's almost like a reunion when they get to go racing again.
You may go to a race where there are more cars, but the quality of cars and
they're all nice.
The combination of quality and quantity, I don't think that there's anything. I sent Tyler Crossnow a text on Thursday or Friday, and I told him, say, hey man, I hope you're as proud of this as you should be, because there's 300 some odd race teams there, and like every one of them's got a $500,000 tow rig. Every one of them, you know what I'm saying? Like that's, I mean, I bet there's probably $20 million worth of tow rigs in Benson, North Carolina on Saturday.
Oh yeah, PDRA. That's the one thing they definitely have covered is total value of tow rigs on the property at any time. They got that covered.
I mean, it is bananas. I mean, I would be like, you roll in there, like we always cheer on these guys showing up with an open trailer, right? It's cool and it's vintage. It's kind of badass and outlawy, but like,
they won't let you in the gate. They'll look
you're
at
going
you.
to a PDRA race without
you're the wrong track,
man.
The
wrong track, bro.
Hey, buddy.
You must be looking for George Ray's.
Yeah, man, you ain't gonna fit in here. Yeah, because it's like, whose pit do you hang out at? Everybody's got like a super nice rig and badass air conditioning. I remember when I grew up racing, one or two guys had air conditioning in their trailer, and you knew who they were because that's where everybody was eating lunch. That's where everybody was hanging out between rounds or after the race is over. I mean, it was like I remember my dad got an air conditioner, a rooftop air conditioner for his enclosed trailer.
We never had air conditioning in our trailer.
We had those vinyl strips, you know what I'm talking about, like the door, and it was as if
we felt poor at PDRA. We had to leave the back door down to try to get some air going. They're like, put your door up, put your back door up. We're like, no, dude, we don't have AC. They're like, what the hell are you doing, man? Rednecks out here amongst the PDRA.
Oh man, it's
elite.
So funny. We felt literally when we got a rooftop air conditioner that would half-ass. We were so ghetto back then. We put those vinyl, what is it? You know, the strips across the sides, and we'd put like that makeshift curtain up because we could only keep like the front 8 foot of the trailer really cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you had to like section off the back of the trailer and be like, hey man, if you've got to go sit back there, best of luck to you.
We should have their living room.
It's
with our window air conditioner. You know?
Yeah, man. It's oh my goodness.
It has changed so much if you think about that, because it wasn't, you know, in the like let's say mid 2000s, man. It was very rare to see someone that had an air conditioned rig, and now it's like just don't show up without one.
I mean, if you had a trailer that had a small living quarters in it, you were balling. Like, you know what I mean? You were literally living the good life. If you had, I remember thinking it was a big deal to get an air mattress for the gooseneck of my dad's trailer and not have to sleep on aluminum, you know? It was really, really funny. Who's picking on me here? Back then, a lot of drivers were still rolling around with an open car trailer. Wes. Oh, yeah. We're still, okay, good. I'm glad that somebody, I thought he said they're taller than you, Wes. And I'm like, well, that's true too, probably. All right, guys. Well, hey, Kayla, thanks for being a part of it this week. I hope we get to have you back on here. If you guys haven't checked out the latest issue of Drag Illustrated magazine, log on to dragillustrated.com. Very proud of the fact that you can check out the entire magazine, search it for your name or a friend's name for free. Log on to dragillustrated.com, click that cover, and you can check out the entire magazine. Of course, if you'd like to get it in your mailbox, it's a pretty easy process as well. Log on to the site and subscribe. Guys, thanks for being a part of it. Shout out to all of our sponsors, Flow Racing, Stroud Safety, Redline Synthetic Oils, Racers Club. Thanks for being a part of it, guys. What a day, right?
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Good times.
Thanks, guys.
We got to talk more. We got a more Jim Halsey talk, I think, next week. We owe him more, personally.
Yeah, I need to have the Daddy Shark on here.
Well, you know, it'll come on and be like, hey, man, how about that weekend? And
like, it was
a lot. And he'd be like, yeah.
Oh, no.
Crushed it. You know, it's like, oh, come on, Jim. You know, like talk some shit.
Thanks to Gene Fulton, Stacey Hall.
Yeah, he gives the world's shortest speeches at the PDRA banquet every year, and it's like become an event 4 years in a row. And I think he spent like a total of 6 minutes.
No. It was 42 seconds or something. We clocked. Yeah. We had a stopwatch going, Jim.
Yeah. Shout out to the team.
He does everything.
Everybody
quick.
Works really hard, and we will continue kicking everybody's ass. And
it's fast, yeah.
Yeah. Till next time. All right, guys. Thanks a bunch. Appreciate it.
Later,
Thanks
y'all.
everybody for tuning in.
Thanks.
See ya.
I don't have any music this time.